Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm game director on Dead by Daylight. I'm also a product evangelist for Behavior Digital.
So, Matthew, you got a new IP for your game, Silent Hill. Let's talk a little about
Yeah.
that. How did that relationship with that IP in your studio come about?
Well, obviously, all of us are big fans of video games in general at the company, and the people on the project. Obviously, you can't talk about horror video games without referencing Silent Hill in some way or another. So it's always been really high up on our list. Uh, Konami is the publisher of record for the retail version of the game in Japan. So it's a relationship that already existed. Obviously, it's a big company, so the people in charge of the licenses and things like that are not the exact same people we were dealing with. But we have contacts. Also, Behavior has been making games, as you may know, for about 28 years now. Obviously, we know people here and there, everywhere. And so we essentially had a lot of common contacts and partners, and it just turned into a conversation at some point, and we talked to the right people at Konami, and we just said, we'd love to do something with you guys. Obviously, we've always been fan, and they were instantly interested. Uh, for us, it's kind of a dream come true. It's also like I keep repeating that, but it's very very true, and especially when we saw the reception from the fans out there, a strange moment filled with pride and humility at the same time, because it's it's such a big deal for us, obviously, but at the same time, getting the approval of Konami, the team that did Silent Hill, saying, "Yeah, we do think that your game is great and that our IP would fit in well in there, and it's the time to bring it back to the masses in some way, because it's been a long time since people have seen new Silent Hill uh, content, whatever form it took. So being deemed worthy of being the ones to bring it back today, it felt really, really good, I'd have to say.
So, like, you guys are really familiar with crossovers and working with other people's
Yep.
IP. But where does that process start? Is that something that you reach out to the original owners of an intellectual property, or do they reach out to you?
It depends. It really depends. And many properties, Silent Hill is different. It's owned by Konami, and Konami are the ones dealing with it because they're an active current company. But in many cases, for other licenses that we've dealt with in the past, these licenses are handled by an agent or an intermediary, someone who's just like managing a catalog of different intellectual properties, especially relating to film. So in some cases, these people reach out to us. They're always on the lookout for interesting opportunities to essentially spread their brand and use it in different ways. In other cases, it's us reaching out to people, going, "Oh, by the way, we really want this one." Like, I don't know, the creative director Dave on the team goes, "Hey, I really want this in the game. Just make it happen." And then I go, "Okay, let's see." And then I tweet to Tony Hawk or something. It's a sometimes it's just weird chances like that, and sometimes we already have like professional contacts that are in touch, and then it's usually a few conversations that lead to once we agree that it's a good idea, then we sort of say, okay, we'll do this, and then we put that in the hands of our legal departments, respective legal department, and then it can take minutes or months depending on who's involved in there. And then they say, okay, now we've agreed on paper, good, and then we can move on to the actual making of the content.
Sounds like it's a very vigorous process, and it all depends on who owns the IP at the current time.
Well, also some IPs have many different versions of it, and some people might still be unclear about who owns the IP and how they're able to use it. The whole trademark and the ownership of intellectual property is, I'd say, it's probably a very very uh, valid field to go into if you want to be a lawyer that practices and has many many hours in front of them of being paid. quite a lot of money to discuss who actually owns what and what they can do with it. But yeah, sometimes it's complicated, but for the most part, it's been pretty straightforward for us. Maybe we got lucky. There's only a few exceptions where it was a little more complicated, but most of the time we just find a way to make it work.
So can you guys talk about what's coming new with this Silent Hill expansion? Obviously, we have a new hunter, a new killer, and we also have a new map and some new survivor skins or new survivors.
Yep. So the survivor and before I go into the details of that, I should probably address something that came up afterwards. For us, it was sort of something that was very obvious, but then when we released the content, the fact that we put characters that have never interacted in the actual Silent Hill franchise together, a lot of purists would say that this is maybe a wrong thing to do, or that it's not accurate representation of the license. But in the world of Dead by Daylight and the world of the entity, it makes sense that these different characters are sort of brought together. So the survivor we decided to go with is Heather, also known as Cheryl Mason, so Heather Mason. She's a super interesting character. She's kind of weird. She's sort of known to be a representation of the she's a vessel of God or something like that. She's the reincarnation of two different souls. She's got a very strange backstory that's linked to dark forces, and we thought it was a really good fit for the kind of story that we tell. We thought she's a really cool character. People like her, so we put her in. As far as the killer is concerned, we felt we didn't really have a choice to go with the most iconic, menacing presence out there, and go with Pyramid Head. So he's big and intimidating, and he's just perfect for Dead by Daylight. The fact that he comes in with that ridiculously oversized knife and he drags it around on the floor, and these imageries and the strength of his presence is something that is unique to that character, and we're very happy to bring him in. And Dave Richard, our creative director, is actually one of the biggest fans of the franchise. Like, he knows everything inside and out, and he really wanted to make sure that the Pyramid Head that we brought into the game was the right version. So, he's been represented a few different ways through different mediums, whether it's the movie or the games, but what we wanted was the one from Silent Hill 2, which is essentially an anthropomorphized version of the guild of James Sunderland, and it's really more of a symbol than an actual entity, and he turns into a thing, and it's we thought it was the most interesting one, and it's also the most original version. So that's the character that we brought in. As I said earlier, one of the problems, more or less, that we face is the fact that Cheryl Mason never directly interacts with the Pyramid Head in the games, but the world of the entity is always a bit of a, like we say, it's not a real place. It is a different place, and it's things that are in there are not the real things. They're the ideas of things. It's a nightmare about a thing. And I think that anybody who played all of Silent Hill and knows that universe and watched the movies and is sort of plagued by these thoughts, if they had a nightmare about Silent Hill, it's very possible that these characters would be present because they are so important in that story. And therefore, bringing them together into Dead by Daylight makes perfect sense in our lore. The map that we chose to bring is the Midwich Elementary School, which we thought was super interesting. There's a lot of different locations throughout the Silent Hill universe, but this one is special. It's filled with little jump scares and details and secrets and symbolism, and we really wanted to bring that to life in Dead by Daylight. One of the things that was super fun too is that usually when we build maps, we as I said, we sort of build a nightmare about a place. It's a memory of a place. So a lot of the times, like if you look at the original, the Foundry, or even the The gas station, there's no real like layout to the buildings. It's more like you're in a foundry, but there's no machinery, or it's very very generic machinery. It's like a nightmare. The details are not right, they're sort of wrong, but you know where you are and you feel the space. In the case of the elementary school, we really wanted to recreate the space as it was experienced by the players originally, as faithfully as possible. So the layout, the different juxtaposition of all the different rooms and what's in them is really as close as we could to the original way it was presented in the game, even with the inside court and everything. We changed obviously some of the metrics because the door frames and the windows need to be a certain size to fit with our gameplay mechanic, but the rest is as close as possible to the real thing. And we did bring in a lot of these little winks and jump scares and secrets and little touches here and there, and this is one of the things that I think the fans reacted to very very strongly.
So if you've already played or were a huge fan of Silent Hill 2, you already have an advantage on the map because it's the exact same layout as the game.
It won't matter. And people, you learn the map. In some of our maps are a little more random than others. Like especially the early maps were more like tiles that get shuffled and you don't really know where you're going. In some others, the layout is a little more strict and repeats in a little closer each and every time. But the advantage you get out of that is minimal, I'd say.
So does the map stay stagnant, or does it like transform during your gameplay?
Well, not during the gameplay, but from one game to the other, it will be different. And yeah, no, there's bits I can't talk about. But
save for later.
We did hide a lot of stuff in there, and some stuff has not been discovered. I'll just leave it at that for now. But from one game to the other, the way the map is generated will be slightly different. The layout will be pretty much the same, but some of the windows will be in different places. Some of the entry points and the navigation from room to room will be changed. So you can never be absolutely sure that if you're running into a room, you'll be able to get out the same way you did last time, or where the basement will be different, where the generators will be, and the chests and the lockers. There's always a random element in there.
So can you, if you're allowed to, can you talk about some of Pyramid's Head's abilities and his passives and stuff like that, and what he's bringing to the table?
So obviously he can hit people with a big knife. That's sort of a given. It's super fun. But his main power is kind of interesting because it's a thinking power in a way, because you can drag the knife on the ground and create these sort of trenches that get filled with this negative otherworld evil essence in there with barbed wires and nasty stuff, and then you can sort of block off segments and things like that. It's not impassable, so survivors can go through that, but if they do, they become tormented, which is a new status effect that we put into the game. If you're tormented and the killer manages to put you down, he can immediately send you into a cage of atonement, which is like a hook. It's the exact same mechanic. So you can try to escape. Some people can try to get. Actually, no, you can't try to escape, but you can struggle, and people can try to save you from it. But the thing is, you don't have, as a killer, if someone is tormented, you don't have to pick them up and try to find a hook and put them on the hook. What you need to do is you find them on the floor, you pick them up and send them immediately to that cage of atonement, which is a huge time saver. It bypasses a few of the meta perks that we have in the game, like DS or things like that. And it's a huge time saver. And the thing is, obviously, if it's the third time you do that, you send them automatically to die, essentially. The other thing that his power does is while you're dragging this, so your power is activated, you're sort of rooted into the other world, you can use the right click, I think, it might change during the PTB, it doesn't matter. You can use a button to then create a shock wave, so it's a big shock wave in front of you, and that's an attack that actually goes through all geometry. It can actually hit someone from the other side of the wall. It can hit someone through anything. It's a really interesting power because it's fast, but there is a bit of a warning to it, so survivors might be able to dodge, uh, but sometimes you can't if you're in a corridor. Sometimes it's quite a wide power, so it's going to be very, very interesting. And so that's his main ability. His main ability is that big knife and dragging it on the floor and being able to create that shockwave and doing the Cage of Atonement. Then his perks, most of his perks actually have to do with tricking perception. So being a little sneakier and removing giving the oblivious status to survivors so that they lose their aura reading and things like that, so that you can then surprise them and judge them from up close.
So then let's move on to the survivor. What is
Heather.
she bringing you to the table?
So she's got a few interesting perks that link her to the dark forces. One of them especially gives her a certain amount of. They keep saying that it gives her power over the entity. I don't agree. It's more of a. She can ask favors, I guess, but depending on how you see it, it doesn't matter. One of her powers allow her to block generators the same way that the killer can. So if you feel that the killer is coming to a generator that's almost done, you can block the generator for a certain period of time so that the killer won't be able to knock it, it won't be able to break it, and it'll stay like this locked while you go and do something else or you run away. There's a few things like that that you can do, links with the entity that help you with that. I'm not going to go into too much detail, especially because we just closed the PTB right now, and there's tweaks that are being done to these powers before we release on the 16th, which is very, very soon.
So, like, I mean, when you guys add a new killer or a new hunter and a new survivor, what goes into the balancing? Because you guys are one of the few asymmetric games that have actually got it down to a science. Like, this works. This asymmetrical gameplay works. When a lot of people struggle with that formula.
It's tough. I think that in a certain sense, we maybe have made our peace with the chaos. We understand that it's not about balancing it perfectly, because it can never be balanced, and especially because every time we release a new chapter, not only do we bring a new killer that has a completely new power set that sort of changes how everything is played, but we're adding 3 new killer perks and 3 new survivor perks, and all of these can be used in combination with every other single perk that we have in the game already, and then you can have 4 survivors on the team, each with that power and others in combination, against a killer who now has more combination. Like the resulting matrix of possibilities is insane. It's most designers on the team don't even want to know about that, because there's no way to take into account every single possible ramification of a new perk that you've created at this point. That's why we have the PTB, so that we can have, I don't know, 10,000 people playing it, for a week to check if we've done anything completely insane. Most of the time we want to do something that's a little insane, just to, shake things up and force the meta to be refreshed and force people to learn new strategies, which is always great. That keeps the game fresh and exciting. But we don't want to break shit. And we don't want to make older perks obsolete. So they need to be different enough that they all can sort of be there.
I feel like with your last 2 killers you released, including the Silent Hill Pyramid Head, that you guys are experimenting a lot more with range dynamics, more so than you did before.
Well, range is a space where we tried to stay away from it to a certain extent. It was always to be a very close thing, very personal thing. I'm reminded of maybe you've said Léon the Professional, a great movie from 80s, I guess. But in it, he talks about the fact that, as a killer, You have the sniper rifle, which is probably the first weapon that you learn about because it's the easiest and it allows you to stay really far away. And then the last weapon you learn is the knife, because you have to get really, really close and intimate with your victim, and then you have to interact with them, and it's much more personal and it's much more powerful. And that's sort of that's not at all what was the motivation, but it's sort of the idea is we wanted to create a really, really intimate and close relationship between the killer and the survivor. We wanted to make sure that the chases are exciting in the game, and you're not chasing someone if you've got a gun and they don't. You just shoot them. So all the range things that we tried, I mean, even it started with the nurse who can teleport. We needed to make sure to sort of counterbalance that with something. And then we had the huntress who could throw axes. But the arc of it and the fact that she's got a very limited number of them, allowed for this to still stay something cool, and also to have surprise moments. Hitting someone from across the map with a hatchet by going over everything is still a moment where you go, oh shit, that worked. And it's not every day you get hit by a hatchet that comes from anywhere. And then we had things like the clown that control bottles that don't hurt you, but they screw with your perception and they make things difficult. And then we added the death slinger, and he actually has a gun, but it's got a harpoon on it, and he drags you back to him, which again brings back this notion of being really close by and much more intimate with your victim. So yes, I guess we're playing with the range a little bit in the last few that we've done, but it always stays very, very, very close.
And also we'll talk about, you guys are on every platform. You guys are on Switch, you guys are on PS4, Xbox, and PC. Does the crossplay aspect come up in any of your dev meetings? Are you guys planning to do crossplay? Is that something that can be foreseen future in your game? And if that's not in the books, would cross save or progression transfer be open as well?
Yeah, so all these cross things, whether it's cross save, cross progression, cross play, cross friends, all of these things are super important, and they keep coming back in our daily meetings and what do we want to do with the game. There are many, many limitations, whether it's technical or whether it's just the different first parties and how they want to interact with each other. We have to respect that, of course. And it's a lot of these are extremely delicate technical things, which I'm not the right person to go into details about, but there's a lot of work involved in making sure that it works well. But it's something that we want. We want, Dead by Daylight, we always said we don't want to fraction our community. So for instance, the maps have always been free for everybody because we didn't want to break the community in two with the people who only have this map and the people who don't, and so the matchmaking would be split in two. We never wanted to do that. And right now we have different pools of community, and the more we manage to bring them together, the better it'll be for everybody. So obviously the grand goal and the intention would be to allow everybody to play with everybody, but it's a difficult and it's a long process. So we talked a little bit in the anniversary about the roadmap and the next few steps. I'm not going to repeat them here because I don't have the exact dates or the promises in my head, but I know that we have already we've done some crossplay already between I believe the Epic. See, again, I'm not exactly sure what we've accomplished yet. So
you have PC crossplay with Steam, and I think on PC it's like different PC platforms you have crossplay, I believe.
But that's it. So we want to add more and more as we go. We want to add more, friends being able to invite each other, and if possible, the progression would be great to add. It's not always possible, but it's something that we absolutely want to do more in. That's definitely going to be one of our big subjects of attention this year.
And then my last question, which is kind of a fun question, if you can't answer it, I understand, but obviously, you have a lot of horror monsters in your franchises, a lot of people that would fit well in the franchise, but one that keeps coming up, at least in the video game space, is Mr. X Nemesis from the Resident Evil series. Has that ever been on the table? Have you talked about it to Capcom? Has Capcom talked to you about it?
Like, If it was something that was in the works, I couldn't talk about it.
Mhm.
If it was something that we discussed with them but haven't come to an agreement yet, I couldn't possibly talk about it. If it was something that we decided we would never do, it probably is something that I would not be able to talk about. So it's very difficult for me to talk about these things. That being said, you are correct. There are a few very iconic legends of horror that are left out there in the world, whether it's movies or TV or in video games or other medium, whether it's comics or manga or you name it. Uh, and we are regularly talking about the ones we would like to see in the game, the ones that would make sense. For us, the biggest hurdle, well, the first barrier to this is, would it make sense for these characters to step into the world of Dead by Daylight? And would we need to change them in any way that would make us not being able to honor them properly? Like some characters, they are a certain way and they have rules around them and the universes that they inhabit. And we need to make sure that we can respect those rules and not transform them into something that they're not. So that's usually the biggest question. The rest are details. The rest are details of negotiation or legal details, and these just take time.
Awesome, Matthew. So when can people experience your Silent Hill DLC in Dead by Daylight?
June 16th of 2020, which is in a couple of days from now, 12 days. So yeah,
Very
it'll be
soon.
released. Yeah, it'll be released on every single platform at the same time. I believe just mobile is gonna be waiting a little bit. We don't have a date yet for mobile, just because it's such a fresh, new SKU for us that we're still in the process of bringing it in line with all the others. The intention there is, of course, to be in line and in sync with the release of everything on all platforms. But for now, mobile still has to wait a little.